For those who were not here earlier, I'm doing a kind of an ongoing series of little talks here throughout the day, nine times in fact, which function as something like stoppers for the marathon. So once in a while, I bring back the topic of the history and the emergence, the development of art institutions in order to better understand Cedric Price's idea to create a new kind of institution, which was very fundamental for us in developing this project here. So my second talk today is called Accumulation around 1565. This is the title. So we are moving on in time, but very, very slowly. We're still in the 16th century. And it is a story about the friendship between two men. Those two. The left one is Samuel Kicheberg, and the right one is Hans Jakob Fugger. Their friendship not only brought one of the first museums into being, the Art and Curiosity Chamber Cabinet from Munich, Münchner Kunstkammer. That was significant because it was one of the first European museums that was based on some kind of systematic forms of display. It also did so by fusing two different spheres that we tend to think of opposite, humanism and commerce, because Kicheberg was an intellectual, and Hans Jakob Fugger was the son of the famous Fugger family, so he was a merchant banker. Samuel Kicheberg, in fact, was a Belgian author who, in 1565, that's where the date comes from, published the earliest known treatise on museums. In fact, he was the first one to connect the totality of the material world, artificialia such as statues and sculpture, naturalia such as mounted animals and plants, scientifica, exotica, antiquities, and so on, into a unity worthy of the term museum. Hans Jakob Fugger, as I said, was the son of the famous merchant family from Augsburg. Like any Fugger offspring, he had been educated in the finest universities in Europe before he was set on tour to work in various Fugger outposts across Europe to be trained for running the family business. But in the end, he proved to be incapable of developing enough interest in the money side of things, so he entered the service of his friend Albrecht V, who was the Duke of Bavaria and the owner of this collection, where he met Kicheberg, who was also hired by the Duke of Bavaria to work on a new presentational structure for the collection. Once in the service of the Munich court, Fugger played a quite significant role. In fact, it was only after his arrival that the collection took on its full form. Why is that so? What was the role of a banker in an art or curiosity collection in the 16th century? I earlier spoke about museums as places where curiosity is cultivated, which is very fundamental, but it's only one leg that any collection stands on. The other is the principle of accumulation. So curiosity, the desire for the new, and accumulation, the desire for more, are sort of the two basic fundamental principles that any idea of the collection, of a museum collection, is built upon. But they are also the two basic principles that modern market societies are driven by, modern market economies are driven by. The desire for new, forever more, and the desire for more, for accumulation. People like the Fuggers understood this connection right away. At the time of Hans Jakob, the Fuggers not only owned this huge business empire, they had also had very, very big collections, having access to virtually any materials or goods that could be commercially transacted. Many acquisitions were made along their lines of communication and trade. They, in fact, had a Kunstkammer, an art cabinet 30 years before the Duke of Bavaria. So it's actually a transfer from the bank, from the merchant, from the commerce area to the cultural area here. Why was it important for them to collect? Because these collected for two things. Because first of all, these collections provided something like a ritualistic frame for the stream of new things. I spoke about that this morning that came to Europe. They provided a space of display where all these wondrous, rare, exotic things, jewelry from North Africa, Chinese porcelain, silk, feather trimmings, branches of corals next to Greek sculptures or antique coins and so on could be displayed, could be actually viewed. But the other reason, and that's also very important, is that that these collections provided a specific ritual to encounter these objects in a sort of refined, cultural, sophisticated way. And this is interesting and significant, not only culturally, but also economically, because the 16th century is not only the time where the early museums begin to emerge, it's also the time of a beginning early consumer culture. So a culture that was not only linked to the possession of material goods, but also to the establishment of an increasingly individualized and subjective relationship to things. And again, like it was the case with this new attitude of curiosity, also this refined, sophisticated, subjective relationship to things is not something that sort of fell down from the sky. It had to be trained, it had to be habitualized, no? It had to be acquired, sort of. Transferred into habits, into an attitude, into a culture. And again, this is what happened in museums. Museums functioned as places where precisely this could be trained, experienced, and practiced. Aldrovandi's collection, about which I spoke earlier, had 7,000 objects. And Aldrovandi had a specific individual story for each and every one of these 7,000 objects. So this idea to connect this material thing with an individual story, with subjectivity, is something that the museum sort of provided a cultural frame around. This refined, sophisticated relation to things was, as I said, above all economically very important, because these new, an expanded trade that increased through the import of all these things, needed an increased demand. So this is basically why it was important for the Fuggers to collect their collections, serve practical purposes in running their business. They basically functioned as sales rooms. But similarly, someone like the Duke of Bavaria was responsible for administering the economy, culture, and religion of the state and used his collection to these ends. Therefore, he could use a Fugger in his team, who as a businessman and a banker not only had practical knowledge in handling huge amounts of data, in producing inventories, which he was which he was trained to do as a banker, but which became very useful for him in organizing a museum collection also. But moreover, he understood this intrinsic connection between commerce and culture that forms a core, an important feature of the DNA of any museum. As I said yesterday already many times, the museum's rise as something like a modern, specifically modern ritual, because it is fertilized by quintessentially modern secular curiosity, but also market-based principles. Maybe now we can have the last image. So art's focus on economy, that up to today is a recurrent topic in the media, but also in any critical discourse on art and exhibitions and biennials, is not the corruption of something pure. Yeah? It's there from the beginning. One could even say that museums derive a part of their essential social function from the fact that they train a refined, individualized relation to products, to essentially products. They play an important role in developing what Adam Smith calls the educated consumer. What is this? Or, and that's my last sentence, to put it in the words of Boris Greuze, they function as something like preschools of consumption. Thank you very much. I see you again later.